What's up, everybody? We're here. We're a couple minutes late. John's actually in office today. So I was just listening to myself echo there for a second to start the video. So it's going to be a good day. It's Wednesday. We're working on some stuff here behind the scenes that we're excited to share with you. That's always fun when he comes in town. We do some extra stuff. That's always fun. And we love to hear what you guys think about that. But a lot of you have been sending me a bunch of different videos and interviews on this Ruby Franke 8 passengers YouTube mom criminal case. And as we've talked through this case and looked at the details, so many people have the same question or the same feeling or are pointing the finger at least somewhat at the same guy, and that is Ruby's husband. And we're wondering, how could he not have known? Where was he while this was going on? What did he know about what was happening with his kids? What did he know about Jodi Hildebrandt? Was he in on it? Was he negligent? Should he have known? Should he have done something? Her sisters pointed the finger at him, basically saying he's the one that had the legal right and ability to do something, and he didn't do something. So, because that's a big question on everybody's mind, I looked back at a video a couple days ago that people sent me, and his lawyer spoke out and let us know what Ruby's husband knew, where he was, why he was where he was, what he didn't know, and who they think is to blame. And they also talk about why he has remained silent to this point, and it may not be what you think. It's not just to protect himself and, exercising his Fifth Amendment right. It seems like there's really not that big of an investigation into him at this point. I'm not so sure law enforcement thinks he has any culpability at this point. That could always change. But we're going to hear a lot about that from his lawyer in today's interview. Another interview that you all sent me, 10 days or 2 weeks ago was Ben Chew's thoughts on this case. Now, I don't have that one queued up for today. I haven't watched it beginning to end, but if you want my reaction to Ben Chew's reaction, which we've done on some other cases in some other situations, it's kind of feels like The Matrix a little bit, or Inception. But if you guys do want that, throw a Ben Chew comment in the comments or in the live chat as we watch this video. And maybe when I have some time, I'll record my reaction to that and play it later this week. So let's take a listen now. Hit that like button if you haven't already. And don't forget to subscribe so you get all the videos that we're bringing out on this topic if you enjoy this topic. But let's get to this video now and see what the husband had to say through his lawyer about his involvement and what he knew.
Once known as the father and husband in the 8 Passengers YouTube series, Kevin Franke's attorney now says the father of 6 is fighting for custody of his children.
There's a lot to be told. There's a lot of chapters in this book.
Law and Crime Network crews traveled to Provo, Utah this week to sit down with Kevin Franke's attorney, Randy Kester. He says his client had no idea his children were being abused and instead points the finger.
In our old office, hold on, let me back this up. Oh, of course, hold on.
He says his client.
In our old office, and like every law office of all time, you have these bookshelves with these books. And I think it's so funny that every lawyer likes to do their interviews right before them. If you search way back into the archives on our page from our little, 1 minute frequently asked questions videos that are on our website, you'll see us sitting in front of these same exact books and bookshelves. It's just something lawyers of a generation before mine liked to do.
Had no idea his children were being abused and instead points the finger at Jodi Hildebrandt, alleging she brainwashed the entire family.
That once she got involved in their lives, it just destroyed his family. It did. And he's now trying to recover from that and put it back together. He wants it back the way it was.
In recent days.
So there's your first indication of who they're going to point the finger at. And that's the first stone thrown at Jodi Hildebrandt. More to come.
Kevin Franke has stopped speaking with his estranged wife, Ruby, after she dropped bombshell news on him during a jailhouse phone call.
He hasn't spoken to Ruby for about 2 weeks now.
So he did speak with her after her arrest, it sounds like then.
He spoke with her, I think there are reports out there actually. He spoke with her a week ago Friday, and that was when he started to realize the broad perspective of the deception that he'd been fed. And in that discussion, found out a lot of things from her that he should have been told. He should have been involved. And after the phone call, he just decided that he'd been deceived and hasn't had contact with her since.
In fact.
So He has talked to her, which is interesting. And if it was a jail call, it'd be recorded. And he basically said he found out that everything he was told about where the kids were and what help they were receiving was a lie and was deception. And he had no idea what was actually going on. And he was being kept from the kids. Now we'll see how they continue to quote unquote prove that.
Kevin Franke hasn't even discussed the abuse allegations with his wife.
His backing off from communication with Ruby was because he felt betrayed. He felt deceived. And so he didn't feel like that it would merit any further consultation and discussion between them. But I don't know. He may be following the proceedings, but they're pretty inaccessible. Neither one of us have been willing to drive 250 miles just to go to a short hearing. And it's my understanding that the WebEx links have crashed. And so I just gather information and give it to him about what's going on.
Yeah.
So this is something I find hard to believe. He didn't ask her about the abuse because of the deception. He doesn't feel like it's something they need to talk about. That could absolutely be true. Absolutely be true. I just think that that's one of the first questions most husbands who had no idea what was going on. If I was a prosecutor and I was trying to prosecute this guy, I'd be like, isn't it true you didn't even ask her what was going on? So you guys talked, you didn't ask her what happened, you didn't ask her what was going on. You say it's because she lied to you before. But isn't it actually because you knew exactly what was going on? You guys already agreed to this. You didn't have any curiosity because you knew. Something like that if you want to cross-examine a guy like this, because to me, it's really interesting that he didn't even ask what happened. He didn't even ask, how is this possible? Is that true? Did you know Jody was doing this to our kids? He didn't even ask those questions is what it sounds like. Now, I don't know. That's really interesting. Gypsy Soul said, lawyers of a generation before mine, what a politically correct way to call out old timers. Hey, I didn't say it. You said it, not me. Lady Los Sandra said, oh my gosh, Peter, you read my mind. LOL, I have those books, The Court Reporters. You know what we should do? I can't take this camera with me, but later today I will walk in. So we used to have bookshelves and literally hundreds of these books. My dad loved them. My dad's got some cases reported in them and we kept those. We have like maybe 2 bookshelves left with these books on them still. So I'll take a picture maybe and post it to our community poll. They're like in a back, like storage hallway, basically, that we never use, Cindy. My dad still does use them. My dad still buys books now. I tell him, Dad, we already have that all on the online Westlaw catalog, but he still likes to buy them. He likes to have his hands on them. We do bring certain books like evidence and certain rules of civil procedure and criminal procedure to trial with us. So we do have those books, but not all these ones that are basically for show. We don't use any of those.
That's fair. As far as what Ruby has said to Kevin, has she denied these allegations and said it didn't happen?
They have not had that conversation.
Is there a reason why?
I think because it's pretty apparent to Kevin from the reports that it did happen. He believes his son and the reports that his son has given to law enforcement and others.
Late last month, Frankie's 12-year-old son
But,
broke free from Jody Hildebrandt's
would his son know that the mom was in on it? I think he would at least ask his son if the mom was in on it or what the mom knew, or if she's the one that tied him up, or was it Jody Hildebrandt, and why did they do this? Like, I still think there's some things you would ask the mom, even if your 12-year-old told you. Not, I mean, obviously I would believe my 12-year-old son too, but I think there's some context that at least I'd want to ask my wife as well about what she knew, what she did. Why didn't she stop it? Questions like that.
home in Ivins, Utah, about 250 miles south of this family home in Springville, Utah. The boy ran to a nearby neighbor's home asking for food and water. Investigators found him emaciated with duct tape around his wrists and ankles.
This kid has obviously been, I think he's been detained. He's obviously covered in wounds.
According to Kester, Kevin Franke had no idea what was going on with his children and hadn't even spoken to them in months.
He was shocked.
I mean, that right there is kind of wild that he hasn't spoken to his children in months. That's tough. Now, there are ways that can happen outside of a dad's control, and we'll see if that's the situation they were in. Nina asks, watching from Switzerland, question, do you think Kevin will/can take a deal to avoid charges against him? It's possible, but right now it doesn't seem like there's any investigation against him, and maybe he's just being a cooperating witness. Now, it is possible that if he does have some neglect, that they'll give him some kind of immunity to testify against his wife and Jody Hildebrandt. That is absolutely possible. Don, Could it be, like you said, phone call is recorded so he doesn't have her incriminate herself? Absolutely. If I was the lawyer, I would have said he knows not to have those conversations on a recorded phone call. But the way the lawyer makes it seem is he didn't need to ask her because she had lied to him in the past, or he has his son to believe, so he didn't need to talk about it with her. So I'm just reading off of what the lawyer said. Absolutely, this could be true. And I would, if he was my client, I would advise him of that. Don't talk about anything that could be used against you. Those are all recorded. Complex Lit was also trained in researching in the Stacks books also.
Devastated, hurt, felt deceived, didn't know any of that was going on. He hadn't seen his kids for 12 months or more, and didn't know that they were even in Ivins in southern Utah. He didn't even know that they'd been taken down there,
It just seems wild to me. Absolutely could be true, but it seems wild that he didn't know his kids were even in Ivins. He hadn't talked to them in months. He hadn't seen them in over 12 months. I mean, without court orders, I don't know how that's possible. And maybe there are court orders I don't know about, but man, that would be tough as a dad.
Probably would have objected strongly, but she didn't tell him, and apparently took the kids down there even as early as June, and he knew nothing about it.
Kester alleges that Kevin hadn't seen his children in more than a year, all at the instance of his wife, Ruby Franke.
Kevin very much loved his children and loved his wife, and had a strong bond, an exceptionally strong bond with all of his kids. You've seen pictures of their family together. He was involved in all sorts of activities. He was a great dad. But Ruby felt like there were differences in their marriage, and at one point, in conjunction with Jody Hildebrand, it was sort of like, we have to separate to save our marriage. We'll keep working on our marriage, but for now, if we're going to repair our marriage and be back together as a family, you have to be away.
Okay, so we're going to separate to work on our marriage. Okay, I can respect that. I appreciate people that are willing to work on their marriage and do whatever it takes. But it's like separate for 12 months while I take the kids away and you're not allowed to talk to them for months at a time and you don't know where they are. I don't know. I mean, we're scrutinizing this stuff to see what could have happened to potentially protect these kids and who is culpable in what happened to them. And it seems like everybody for sure believes Jody Hildebrand is culpable as potentially the ringleader and the specific bad actor in this case. And that Ruby at least was complicit in it, allowed it, knew they were there, thought this was good for them, whatever. And kind of the next step out would be Kevin. And that's kind of what we're listening for here. And some of this stuff just seems wild as far as like, we're working on our marriage, yet I'm not allowed to see my kids for 12 months as we work on our marriage. I don't get it. I don't know why people do what they do, but that's a tough one on me.
And you have to work on yourself and don't have contact with the kids. Don't have contact with me unless I initiate it.
Last month, both Ruby Franke and Hildebrand were arrested and charged with 6 counts of aggravated child abuse. Right now, they're being held in the Washington County Jail in southern Utah without bail. But before her arrest, Ruby and the Franke family were already known the world over for their popular YouTube channel, 8 Passengers. This series documented the lives of the Franke family, including Ruby, Kevin, and their 6 children.
Eve has been amazingly well behaved for being in town.
But you yelled at me.
Shh. The fact that I yell at my kids is a secret. We don't want our viewers to know.
Once boasting more than 2 million followers, the YouTube page is now defunct. Kester says the family hasn't created content for the channel in more than a year.
I don't think anything's been posted on that for pretty close to a year and a half. I think January, February of 21, maybe August of 21 is the last time anyone posted anything on there.
And again, that may line up with when the dad was in the picture and maybe make sense why Ruby didn't post on there, because they weren't the happy family they were trying to portray on there anymore because of their relationship issues. Complex Lit said, I find it weird that the father didn't automatically get the kids when this came to light. There's a lot of different issues with that. And I don't want to speculate on why, but I'll just say, generally speaking, there can be some kind of investigation to the father. There can be some kind of investigation to what he knows. That could still be open. There could be things happening in the dependency hearing that Ruby is saying about the dad, or the kids are saying about the dad. There are all sorts of things going on that could affect that we just don't know about, or I don't know about. Rebecca, who doesn't get a lawyer and fight to see his kids? Everybody's got the same sentiment in the chat, or I should say 90+% of the chat. Nirvana, Kevin should have checked on his kids, don't you think? I mean, that's the point, is like we've got to figure out where the neglect lies, right? Like if there's a lot of emails, text messages, and calls, and he's trying to contact them and Ruby's blocking, and she says, if you talk to them, then we're getting a divorce and it's over. I'm going to take the kids away. And that's why he didn't talk to him, because he really was fighting for his family. Then I get it. Might not have been what I do, but at least that's plausible. But I think that action has to come to light before we really can determine what the motivation was behind not seeing the kids for 12 months. Rebecca, the parents have the ultimate decision on how their children are being treated. I couldn't or wouldn't let somebody else tell me how to raise my children. And to be fair, right, and play the devil's advocate, Rebecca, while we may see it this way, you and I, they could turn around to us and maybe say, well, we feel the same way. You're not going to tell me how to raise my children. Now, the law can tell you there is a line you can't cross, even as somewhat of the autonomy you have in raising your children. And that's what we're trying to figure out. Seems like lines were crossed by Jody and Ruby, at least if the allegations are true. And of course, they're innocent until proven guilty, and what they actually did and what, Ruby knew. But as far as Kevin goes, his would be more of a neglect. And it's harder sometimes to draw the line onto where that neglect is and what duty they had and did they breach it and what was reasonable for them to do. That's all a much tougher question in the law.
Is there a reason that they stopped creating content with the 8 Passengers channel so long ago?
I see people posting a bunch that he blocked the kids, wouldn't let them talk to him. They tried to contact him. I don't know that that's true, so I don't want to say stuff like that. I know you guys are having that conversation in the chat. I don't know that to be true. I haven't seen any official reports of that. And that's why I'm saying I do side eye the fact that you haven't seen your kids in a year. That's tough, especially when they're this young, some of them.
I think that Jody and Ruby sort of just pirated off that and moved into this connections entity.
After Ruby Franke's YouTube channel had already taken off, she paired with business partner Jody Hildebrand to create new content, offering counseling services for families in need. They called their organization Connections.
Anytime you think I want, fill in the blank, I don't care what it is, that is not love. Mm-hmm. Love is a gift that you offer because you have generated it inside yourself. And how do you generate love? Well, the only way to generate love is you use your agency to choose principles of truth.
Kester says he's not even sure how to describe the relationship between Hildebrand and Ruby Franke.
So we know that they're business partners, but would it be fair to say that Ruby and Jody are friends?
I don't know. I don't know how to characterize that. I know they did a lot of work together and would often go off together. While Kevin took care of the kids, they would leave and go for days at a time. And while Kevin was taking care of the family until the separation. And then, of course, he was excluded from all that.
When first responders arrived to Hildebrand's home last month, they determined 2 of the Franke children required immediate medical attention. In all, 4 of the 6 children were taken into the care of the Division of Children and Family Services. Right now, Kester isn't sure where the kids are being held and says Kevin Franke does not have any contact with them.
I don't know exactly where they are geographically, but the state has foster care placement. They have their own placement at secure facilities. And and I can't comment about where they are, but they are in the state's custody within the state of Utah.
He does know it's his client's ultimate goal to regain complete custody of his children.
And does your client have contact with any of his children who are under the age of 18?
Not yet.
Is he hoping for that contact?
Oh, absolutely. That's his ultimate objective, is to be able to have custody of them and to be with them and to guide them and be their father again and to bring his family back together. That is his sole objective at this point.
So I see people also mentioning some reviews at BYU and some negativity coming towards the dad. Again, I don't know, but it does say something that they're not in his custody, and that I don't know if he knows where they are and just isn't saying, or it sounded like he didn't know where they were exactly. It just is mind-boggling. Peter, the bottom line, in my opinion, is he wasn't keeping track of and or protecting his kids. You know what it looks like as a dad, I'm sure. So I will say that is what it looks like. But if the dad kind of left, and let's say he blocked the kids, blocked the whole family out, and just left the picture completely, and this was happening, that would be really difficult to fall under criminal neglect. But if he was still involved, then we start to get more and more towards it, the more involved and the more he knew and the more he knew or should have known what was going on, right? So there is a difference if you just kind of leave and get out of Dodge. It's deplorable and immoral, and we don't respect or like or want that for any father. But that's very different when it comes to the charges here and what was going on with his kids while he wasn't in the house and in the picture. Teresa, Jody's practice is to separate the dads and destroy the family to rebuild it. Ruby was bad, but Jody took it to a much higher level. So I've seen people talk about how part of this practice was isolation, was manipulation, and a lot of that was going on. And I think that's something that, I mean, it's definitely where Kevin's pointing the finger. My guess is that's where it's going to be, where Ruby's pointing the finger, is that she was manipulated. She was a victim in this too. She thought this was best for her kids. Now she realizes the difference. She wishes she never would have done it. That type of stuff to me is where this feels like it's heading as far as the defenses go. But if there really was manipulation and Jody has some kind of grip religiously or as a friend or some other way over Ruby, maybe she won't turn on Ruby and point the finger, kind of like the Chad Daybell and Lori Vallow Daybell situation, where it was possible that she could have pointed the finger and her lawyers even tried to, but it seemed like she wanted no part in that. Christine, everyone thinks they know what they would do or how they would handle something until it happens to them. I think that's a good point, Christine. You never really know until it happens to you. We like to think we would do the right thing, and that's how we should live our lives and the decisions we should make. But it's very difficult when these types of things come at you.
Wife's arrest. Hester says Ruby Franke called her estranged husband, telling him it was an emergency.
She was working, and she pretty much just said, "This is an emergency." Because when she first contacted him, I think it was a text, may have been a phone call, and he responded and said, "I'm at work. I need to get back to you." And she essentially said, "This is an emergency. I need you to come get the kids." So he, of course, tore down there, not knowing any of the details of all this that was going on till he got there.
When Kevin Franke arrived in southern Utah, he wasn't allowed to see his children.
Was he able to see the kids when he was there?
No.
And is that law enforcement was kind of putting up the barrier?
Yes. Law enforcement and state agents. Yeah, the children had already, two of the children, as everyone knows, had already been taken to the hospital. So yeah, he was prevented from taking his kids home.
And is that in relation to the Child Protective Services or the Division of Children and Family Services, because they wanted to make sure that no one was there to abuse the children because he's their biological father?
I don't think at that point anyone knew that Kevin wasn't involved in the physical abuse of these kids. And so just out of an abundance of caution, it's my impression that while they did their investigation, they weren't letting anyone have contact with the kids.
But Kester maintains Kevin Franke had no idea his children were in trouble.
And some critics are saying, how could you not know? How could you spend this much time without speaking to your kids? What does he have to say about that?
He was following the advice of who he thought was a professional mental health expert, telling him to stay away. The only way to save his family was to stay apart from his family at that point.
So this answer right here goes to Don's question that he was recommended. Jody Hildebrand was recommended by the Mormon Church. Kevin was in therapy. Jody Hildebrand saying he needs to work on himself. Stop doing those things. She always blames the males in the relationship and starts separating the family, which again, if I represent Jody Hildebrand, I'll say, well, look, that this stuff is true. And that's why he's now pointing the finger at me. He must be biased. But if I represent the Frankies, I would say, look at the manipulation she did. Look at the separation. She, gets off on abusing the kids or whatever it may be. That's why she separates the father, because she knew if the father was around, he would have stopped it. And that's how we know he didn't do anything wrong. That's how we know she manipulated Ruby. So there are definitely going to be arguments on both sides of this in court with how Jody's treatment and manipulation has to do with everything. And a lot of people are asking, could the church have some issues? I don't think there's really any criminal culpability there, but absolutely civilly. If the church recommended Jody Hildebrand, and this is Jody Hildebrand's practices, and they knew or should have known that this is how she treats quote unquote people, then somebody that represents the kids should absolutely file a claim against the church for recommending Jody Hildebrand with these kinds of practices. We've handled cases like this before at camps and different people that work for the church and how they act and how the church protects them. Different churches. I don't just mean the Mormon church. I mean, abuse and perpetrators and criminals do not only go to one denomination or one kind of church or any church at all. There are people that do believe, don't believe this, believe that, all shapes and sizes. But the church sometimes does have at least civil liability in situations like this. Katie Fisher. Hi, Peter. What a sad case. Watching from Edinburgh, Scotland, home of some amazing golf. Katarina goes coastal. Thanks for the super chat. BS. Peter, watch the other interview with one of Jody's other victims. Husband told to stay away. So I think some people sent me this. Send this to me again on Instagram and Twitter. If you don't follow me on there, a lawyer on Twitter and at Tragos Law on Instagram. Send me this interview. Maybe I'll take a look at it and we can do a reaction. We're kind of information gathering here at this point in the case, trying to figure out what's out there, what each side is saying, what we know to be true. And we'll see if this person could potentially be another witness. Azam, I don't follow this family. Are we going to hear from the kids to clear things out? Or is it already out there? I can't accept that the father would be okay not contacting his kids for 12 years. I think it's 12 months. So I think it was at least 12 months that he hadn't seen them. We have only the kids' statements from the probable cause affidavit, which we read in the last video. I don't expect we're going to be hearing from them officially until maybe if this case goes to trial. Netwoman, sorry if you answered this already. Since the attorney is answering this, can the words be used against him, or is this hearsay? So this is hearsay. He is speaking kind of on behalf of his client. So these words cannot be, I mean, theoretically they could, but they're not the client's actual words. So you can't impeach the client with these words. You can kind of bring in, I mean, theoretically you can because it's a prior inconsistent statement, but this is not the same thing as if the client were to have spoken these words himself. And this attorney's kind of being careful to give it in generalities, not saying my client said this specifically, besides, of course, denying the allegations. Azam, 12 months. Sorry. No problem. John O'Rourke, I may have missed this. Were the kids in school? I thought I saw them in some uniforms. I saw some people say maybe they were homeschooled. I think they were in school, but it's a great question because how are they doing all this if the kids are supposed to be in school? It's a good question. Sir Merrick, there are plenty of dads who are more than happy not to know anything about the kids. He went for a gallon of milk. Right. That's very different than dads that are still involved and around with this type of stuff happening.
Well, he thought they were working toward reconciliation. He had no idea that there was this kind of abuse going on. She was telling him that everything was blissful and everything was wonderful. That in conjunction with the fact she didn't tell him that she'd taken the kids to Southern Utah to be in Jody's home. He would have resisted that, but she didn't tell him. He was being advised by his mental health care professional to stay away from the family and not contact the kids.
Kester does say before his wife's arrest, Kevin Franke received counseling from Hildebrand.
During the separation, Kevin was attending men's groups that were facilitated by Jody, and during those groups, he was being downgraded and diminished and told how bad he was and that he needed to repent, and that the best way to repent was to not infect his family with his problems, and so that's why you need to stay away. He wasn't the only one in those men's groups that was undergoing exactly what he was undergoing at her suggestion and recommendation.
Just so I get a better idea of what these men groups are, would that be, I mean, what would that entail? They're going to like a group and kind of talking about things. Who are the people who are kind of like laying down the law, so to speak?
Jody. And they were Zoom meetings. I don't think they ever met together personally, even though maybe a sponsor of someone would meet personally, but sporadically.
Kester says because of this counseling, Kevin Franke believed his relationship was on the road to recovery.
They were working toward reconciliation. There was no separate maintenance documents. There was no divorce filed because he was being led to believe they were working toward reconciliation. He wanted to be back with his family. He wanted to be back with his wife, but was being told by Jody and by Ruby that in order to repair all this, you need to stay away. And was being told that, hey, with you away, everything's blissful. The kids are doing well. Everything's just great.
On Monday, both Ruby Franke and Hildebrand were set to appear in Washington County Court for a status hearing discussing bail. Law and Crime Network was at the courthouse when attorneys filed a motion to delay the hearing. Kester tells us the hearing was pushed because attorneys received new and crucial information from law enforcement, but couldn't give us the specifics. He also says his client isn't quite ready to speak publicly.
And when you and I had texted previously, I asked whether Kevin wants to speak, and your reply was interesting to me in that you said Kevin does want to speak, just not now.
Correct.
So if not now, when?
When the dust is kind of settled, he just doesn't want to jeopardize. He doesn't want to say something because we've committed to the court. We're not going to disparage any of the family. And Kevin's gone above and beyond that. He's not only not disparaged anyone, he's reaching out to try to bring this family closer together and to kind of heal wounds. And so in terms of him speaking out, I think he wants to accomplish the objective that he wants to get his family back together. But I think at some point he'll want to tell the whole story. I just don't think this is a time to declare war. And he and I have counseled, and we believe that this is a time for healing. A lot of bad things have happened to this family, and he values his family and he values his children above all. And
so it sounds like one of the reasons he hasn't come out swinging and come out making statements himself is he does still want to protect his family, and potentially that includes protecting his wife. And he has no problem pointing the finger at Jody Hildebrandt, but so far to me, it does not necessarily feel like he's pointing any fingers or saying any wrongdoing happened from Ruby. So it'll be interesting. Is he going to align himself fully with Ruby? because it's going to be hard to say she didn't know what was going on or wasn't around. So it's a very touchy position to be in.
He's committed to doing whatever it takes, even if it's him remaining silent. He's committed to doing that in order to make the future better for his children.
Meanwhile, Kevin Franke is fighting for custody of his children through a series of juvenile hearings in north central Utah. Kester tells us those hearings may not remain public for long.
It's pretty much just scheduling. The court is taking under advisement a motion to seal the proceedings and to restrict certain people from the courtroom, and probably a pretty broad swath of people, just to protect the privacy and confidentiality of the things that we're discussing involving the children, because they have a right to have their privacy needs met. And I think it's a good thing.
As Law and Crime Network reported, shocking allegations came out of a previous juvenile hearing when Ruby Franke appeared virtually. She claimed one of her children started having problems at age 3 when they began looking at pornography. While Franke didn't mention the child by name, she alleged her child sexually assaulted one of their younger siblings, which led to that child sexually assaulting other kids.
So, interestingly enough, and Rebecca upgraded her membership. Interestingly enough, there were some rumblings that wasn't actually true, or maybe that wasn't actually said. Seems like it's confirmed it was said. And maybe this does connect back to what, was going on with the dad, and, they're trying to connect all this up and make sure it doesn't happen. And that has to do with, the means to which they went and the lengths to which they went to try to force this out of the kids or whatever it may be. But it seems like those accusations were thrown around, which, if not true, could be very problematic, obviously, for the children and for his life, and the 2 children that she's talking about lives, accusing them of such heinous things if she knows that they're not true. But if they are true, is it going to be part of her defense? And even if it is, I don't think it's one that's really going to work. Jonathan Prezois. I have been researching this more, and I'm actually starting to change my opinion. Ruby is a victim as well, and the father couldn't step in. Jody is one that built a corporation to leech on families. Yeah, I don't know. I mean, my mind is still open to a lot of different ways this could go. I do not have my mind made up about how this situation is, but we're getting a lot of information. It's kind of trickling in, and we'll continue to evaluate it as we go.
Kester says his client would prefer if future hearings are closed off.
He thinks that it serves his kids' best interest to give them as little of publicity as possible. I mean, I think it was very damaging the last time when the reporter snuck into the courtroom and then divulged very, very confidential and information that Mrs. Franke stated about one of their children. And I just think that was damaging to everyone. It was especially damaging to the child. So I think that's the kind of thing the court's trying to prevent. He wishes it wouldn't have been published, but in terms, because it's involving his son in a very confidential matter, I shouldn't comment about that. I shouldn't comment about my client's belief about that.
Meanwhile, Kester doubles down, saying
So some very interesting, comments about that. And Don said, at 3 years old, I'm having a hard time believing that that you would watch that at that age. I agree. I think, and again, we're connecting dots here. We're going to have to see how this stuff comes out, but it sounds like one of the older sons may have involved one of the younger ones. And there was some, what they're categorizing as abuse. Maybe that is forcing them to watch certain things or do certain things. And then it even spread to the rest of the neighborhood. I have heard people, and frankly, distributing this type of material can be a crime and can be abuse. So maybe that was the kind of abuse they're talking about with other siblings and people in the neighborhood. I don't know though, but yeah, there's just a lot of strange things going on. Anybody looking at those children in those videos that the children are not healthy, I hope they find sunshine and food, Nirvana said. Sussex Sandra. Jody's MO was to separate the men from their wives and children. A few past clients have spoken of their experiences. Jody has a history of gay behavior and cruelty. Ruby just got worse with Jody. I'm not sure I fully understand this comment. Besides, like, maybe she has an MO of what she does, and I guess separating everybody and just having the wife be alone with her, I guess, is what it sounds like. I don't know. I have not seen all those other interviews at this point.
He believes the entire Franke family was brainwashed at the hand of Jody Hildebrand.
It's a very delicate situation. These kids have been horribly, horribly brainwashed, indoctrinated, and it's scary.
Brainwashed by who?
Jody.
Do you believe that Ruby was brainwashed by Jody?
Yes. And I say that.
So that's a yes. And again, are we starting to get the defenses? Are we starting to see that, Ruby is going to point the finger at Jody as well? And that's really where it's going to go. It seems like that's where it's tracking as far as the legal defenses, but we'll see how it develops.
Because everyone, the focus has been on Kevin. Where was he? Why was he absent? How does that all happen? So he was doing that at Ruby's direction, who I think was being directed by Jody. This is the way that you've got to repair your marriage and repair your family. So they were also.
So they wanted to come out and specifically answer that question. That's one of the reasons we did this video, because in fairness to the husband, if he's going to speak through his attorney, and a lot of people on this channel in this chat asked, where was he? How is this possible? Well, here is his answer, as clear as it can be. He was away at the request of Ruby and Jody to work on and save his marriage and save his family. So to me, if he was asked that question in court, that's how he would answer it. Will a jury believe it? What are the other context pieces that we have around it? Where was he? What was he doing? Was he going to work? Was he dating other people? Was he trying to check in? Was he not allowed to check in? So what did it all look like as he worked through this process? But that is the answer. Do you guys feel like that's a sufficient answer, or do you still have questions? That's what I want to know. If you were members of the jury, would you still have questions?
Sort of kind of being manipulated, and this is just my opinion, by Jody. And I think she knew what she was doing, and it was causing significant damage. And so when Kevin's critics are out there saying, where was he? He was acting at the direction of what he thought was a competent mental health care provider and advisor. And to me, the better question is, what kind of mental health care provider would advise a family and a husband and wife and a husband and children, or a father and children, that this can repair your family if you just stay away from each other? And I'm confident that she told that to Ruby. I'm confident that the children are being
so
told.
He's asking that question, right? If this lawyer is asking that question, is it reasonable for a jury to believe that Kevin should have asked that same question? And did he seek any other help? Even going to the church, I don't know the answer. I've never really been in the Mormon church, but would the Mormon church agree with this, that this is the best answer to separate for 12 months and that this is actually going to help your marriage? I don't know.
That, and Kevin was certainly being told that I know what I'm doing. You need to stay away.
Do you believe that Kevin was brainwashed as well?
I do. He's a bright guy, but.
So everybody was brainwashed by Jody Hildebrand, which I absolutely think is possible. We've seen it happen. Very good and smart people get brainwashed, get in cults, have problems, stuff happens, they get indoctrinated. This is an interesting one, though. This is an interesting one. Life coach, marriage counselor, parenting tips, whatever. Woman brainwashed this whole family. I don't know. I mean, there's got to be evidence of it, right? We've got to see text messages and emails and attempts and how the indoctrination happened. Not just, I don't think you're brainwashed and indoctrinated if somebody says to me one time, stay away from your family for a year. And I say, okay. It's not usually how brainwashing and indoctrination works, right?
But he was desperate to save his family and save his marriage. He loved his kids. He loved his wife. And he was desperate to have that come back together. But it was Jody's intervention that prevented that. And it was manipulating him, saying, if you just do this, if you just overcome your greed and your selfishness and your narcissism, you will get your family back together. But you got to stay away and you got to repent. And so he was following, again, what he thought was expert advice. And that's why he was so distraught and felt deceived and disappointed and frightened when this all came out.
Pastor says it was Hildebrandt's involvement that unraveled the Franke family.
There's a lot I want to tell you, but probably shouldn't at this point, because it's kind of delicate between the state and him trying to get his kids back. So, but there's a lot to be told. There's a lot of chapters in this book, and the more I dig into it, the more I've said this before and I'll say it again. I think that Jody is in the middle of all this, and I describe her as an onion with an octopus inside. The more layers you peel back about Jody's life and connections, every time you peel back a layer, an octopus tentacle comes springing out.
It is all 100% pointing the finger at Jody. This is all her fault. She brainwashed, manipulated, and abused. None of us could do anything. It wasn't anybody else's fault except for Jody. That's what I'm hearing. That's what I'm hearing. And I don't know if they're trying to affect public perception, if this is the legal argument they're going to make. Rebecca said some of this was started way before Jody stepped in. I saw a lot of those comments that they think that the only problems were not just with Jody, but Ruby had problems, and Kevin was definitely in the picture before when there were problems with how Ruby treated her kids. So, I mean, this to me is a very pointed interview and purposeful interview by a lawyer. Not that I blame him or condemn him for it at all, but I think the point of him doing this interview is to make sure everybody knew this was Jody's fault. Lady Law Sandra, Peter, I'm actually in Family Law 101. It's not my favorite. It's too personal. Was Jody involved in Ruby and Kevin's case? It seems like she was. It seems like she was at least some kind of trusted advisor or counselor. Family law is the worst. It would be the last practice area I would ever want to handle. People get so dirty and nasty in family law, and it's so sad. Kids are used as pawns in games, and you find out some people's true colors. It's brutal. I hate it. Yeah, I would never do it. Ever, ever, ever. Azam, if more family comes out accusing Jody of doing the same thing to their kids, can this be a class action lawsuit against Jody? So there's no criminal class action lawsuits like you're asking, really, but it could be multiple victims, or they could be witnesses of other bad acts. If you can't prove those crimes, or they're in different jurisdictions, or they were too long ago, it's past statute of limitations, they could still testify as other bad acts, like we saw in Murdoch, like we've seen in a bunch of other cases for similar actions of the past that show this is how she is. This is her MO. This is what she does. She's done it time and time again, and she did it again here. So they could potentially be witnesses in the case.
Yeah, there is a lot to be told. This is a fascinating and tragic event in their lives, and will probably have lifelong effects. It's gonna take him a long time to help these kids get through the trauma that's been perpetrated on them, but he's up to it, and he's dedicated to doing it.
Kester tells us Franke does want to speak to the media and will do on-camera interviews, just not yet. He says his client is committed to the safety of his children and rebuilding the family bonds.
Interesting. So multiple times in that interview, he said his client, Kevin Franke, Ruby's husband, wants to testify, will do on-camera interviews. Will he wait to get immunity? Will there be some kind of deal before, like some people ask? I don't know. Will he just do it? Will it come back to bite him? I don't know. It's interesting. I don't know if I would be so gung-ho to do on-camera interviews right now if I was him. All right. Gypsy Soul. Peter, going on those same class action lines as Am asked, at what point could the church be liable for the recommendations? The church would have to know, or at least should have known through due diligence, that these were the practices that Jody Hildebrandt was implementing and that there was abuse. Now, I will say, we can disagree with the isolation and sending the father away and all that stuff for 12 months. That probably would be tough to rise to the level of class action for abuse against the church. But tying kids up and taping their mouths shut and starving them and abusing them, absolutely, this would be enough for some class action. If there's a bunch of different factors to make it a class. You can't just say, oh, a couple people are doing it, or a lot of people have the similar claims, therefore it's a class action. In order to be a class action, it has to hit a bunch of factors. Numerosity is one of them. It's got to be a lot of people. It's got to be similar. It's got to be done in the same way. And the connection to the church has to be similar. So there's a lot of different things to make it classified as a class that I'm not sure we have here. But if this is something, if there's just some pipeline here that they were sending kids through this abusive program with Jody Hildebrandt, I absolutely could see some civil liability there. It would definitely be something I could get behind. I'll tell you that much. Okay. So that's all we've got for today. I did see a lot of comments for Ben Chu, so I'll take a look at that one, and maybe we'll record a reaction to that interview at some point here in the near future. As always, let me know in the comments what it is you all want to see and what you want to talk about and what content you're interested in. I appreciate everybody joining me. Don't forget to hit that like button on the way out. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel as well so you can be involved in future conversations. For now, that's all I've got. Until next time, I'm out of here. Thanks for watching another episode of The Lawyer You Know. If you enjoyed this episode, please hit the thumbs up and share with your friends who might be interested here on YouTube. And of course, don't forget to subscribe to our channel. You can also follow us on all social media, Twitter, Facebook, TikTok, at Lawyer You Know. But on Instagram, we are still at Tragos Law. So look us up on there. And don't forget to listen to the Lawyer You Know podcast, available on all major podcast platforms. If you have a case you want to talk to us about, if it's a personal injury case, wrongful death, catastrophic injury, car accident, or slip and fall case, please email us lawyeryouKnow@gmail.com. Of course, all of these links I just mentioned are included in the description below on this episode and every episode. So until next time, this is Peter Tragos, the Lawyer You Know.